Welcome to Bible Over a Beer. I am Randy.
I am Steve.
Good to be back. Thank you for joining us.
As we went anywhere.
Salute.
Nostrovia.
We're still alive. We're still here. We're still reading the Bible, and we hope you are too. We are continuing on 1 Chronicles chapters 16 through 29. So this is the second half.
Yep.
Anything you want to say before we start?
I mean, it's we talked before how it was maybe redundant, and it is. But I'll add my commentary as we get to it. But yeah, I found some interesting stuff and the differences from what we read before.
Yeah, and when we read the first half, I was a little turned off by it. I was like, wait a minute, I already read this. And then as I got into it, I was like, oh, there's just so many good reminders because I don't have the best memory. And so it just brought up so many things from the last books. And I thought that's just a great refresher, So I found it actually very helpful, and I enjoyed reading the second half too. So let's get started. Chapter 16. The ark is placed in the tent. So David had the ark brought back to Jerusalem. He built a great tent for it because, his son Solomon's going to do something a little bit more extravagant down the road for the ark.
Correct.
But it's placed in the tent. David made burnt offerings and peace offerings. He blessed the people. He gave them food. So it was a big celebration.
Oh, yeah.
He appointed Levites as ministers, and he named them, and he also ranked them. For instance, Asaph was the chief priest. And then there were priests kind of ranked underneath him. He also named the priests by their names that would play music and sing. So there's priests that were just dedicated to the music in the temple.
Yeah, you're into names. It's not quite as bad as I think numbers.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of names, and we're not going to go through them in this. That's they're very important because they're there. But for us,
exactly,
we would bore you even more than.
And I can't even pronounce Asaph, so I think I said it pretty
Asaph.
There's a lot of them in there that I can't say, so you'll read them. Continues on with David's song of thanks. I probably don't need to say more. It's a song that he sings, and at the very end,
I thought you were going to sing for us.
The people say,
excited.
Amen, and they praise the Lord. So yeah, David has a whole song that he dedicates to the Lord, and he sings it.
And we learned, that was the joke from back in Samuel when we discussed it the last time. So,
nobody's singing here.
Nope. Least of all me.
And we wrap it up with chapter 16, worship before the ark. David left the priests to minister daily before the ark, and he went through their names again, where they would be positioned, such as there were ministers that were gatekeepers, those that made offerings, those that stood guard, the musicians. And in verse 43, then all the people departed to each of his house, and David went home to bless the household.
Yep.
So I thought gatekeeper was kind of interesting. We're going to actually read more about that down the road. I think I'd make a great gatekeeper.
Yeah,
it seems like the job for me.
Yeah, or it reminds me of Ghostbusters. Are you keymaster? I'm the gatekeeper and the keepmaster. So.
I love having that power of not being able to let people in or whatever,
And there's a lot of them. So, I mean, again, we'll get to it.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, there's like hundreds of them that have jobs, and we'll get into that. We're on to chapter 17, the Lord's covenant with David. David said to Nathan the prophet in verse 1, "Behold, I dwell in the house of cedar, but the ark of the covenant of the Lord is under a tent." This really bothered him. He didn't think that was right. And in the second verse, Nathan said to David, "Do all that is in your heart, for God is with you." He really wants to build that house. David wants to build that temple.
Yeah, I mean, So I'll this is where I'll jump in a minute when you give us some more details. Then I'll
continues on. God speaks to David through Nathan. So he goes through a history of the Lord's relationship and history with the people. David is told that his son will build the house for God and not David. And David was not chosen to build the house because of what reason? Bloodshed.
Yeah, so one thing I will mention that if you're fearful of redundancy, there's some redundancy, but it's very brief. The stories are the same, but they're different. They're very different in tone. We learned in a lot of details and there's a little bit of difference in how the ark is going to get built this time, or not the ark, but the temple, from what we learned in the Samuels and Kings, actually. But it was interesting, because he felt guilty. He's always wanted to. God's provided. He's made him a winner, and he has the moment of, you lived in a tent. I live in this beautiful house. There's a lot of details we don't have from the last readings of how he got all the cedar from Tyr. But so it was interesting how he was. It's just kind of like, I'm going to build him a house. Nathan says, God's on your side, and all of a sudden God talks to Nathan and says, hold the fort. Tell him that he's not the one to build the house. His son will. So
something that is a recurring theme that you'll read in this part is that he's not shy about David's not shy about mentioning how he gathered so much of what's needed to build the temple, and he kind of pats himself on the back. To me, it kind of comes across that way, but we'll get into that a little bit more as we read.
Because I actually have a lot of comments just like that.
Yep.
So
we go on, chapter 17, David's prayer. So in essence, he's saying this long prayer. David gives thanks humbly for all the blessings he's been given and to God's chosen people. You'll get to read that prayer on your own as we did. On to chapter 18, David defeats his enemies. A list of David's triumphs in battle. It's all in there. The people he's conquered, and an accounting of the spoils and tributes from his enemies. He dedicates it all to the Lord.
Yep.
All the spoils of all his battles.
Yeah.
He battled the Philistines, the Moab, the Moabites, King Syrians, Damascus, and the Lord gave him victory to David wherever he went.
Yep. He was, what's the word for it? Ferocious. I don't know if he was ferocious. Oh, he was obviously ferocious, but we hear about it as mighty men. Yeah. David's mighty men. We set it up in the last conversation we had about it. How when one guy could kill like 1,000, so. And
unlike a lot of kings that we've read about where God allowed, the Israelites to be defeated because they had lost their faith or weren't, whatever. He really sticks with David, and David seems to conquer pretty much anybody he sets out to conquer.
Yeah, we haven't. That's one thing. We're not quite there yet, but we learn. We don't hear any faults of David in this, where we learned about that in Samuel. So
yeah, David's administration continuing, chapter 17. Chapter 18. So David reigns over all Israel, and he administers justice and equity to all his people. Equity, that word. Joab over the army. He's named the commander of the army, and he goes on to name a lot of positions that he'll have in his administration: recorders, priests, secretaries, treasurers, etc.
Yeah, a lot of names. I mean, and they are important, but for us, our conversation and sharing,
not needed.
Yeah, we'll just get caught up in
exactly.
names, and I'll keep correcting Randy, and I'll probably be saying them wrong. So I'm looking like an idiot.
We're getting up to a couple names here. Chapter 18, the Ammonites disgraced David's men.
Yep, I remember the story from last time too.
Now after this, Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, died, and his son reigned in his place. Oh yeah. So I remember this too. I read it. It's like, man, I just read this not too long ago. So David sent messengers to console him, and concerning his father, because he had a good relationship with this kid's father. Hunan's sister convinces him that they are spies. The new king, Nahash, cuts these guys' garments and shaves them, which is a big, disgrace for these poor guys.
Yeah, you said, I didn't catch that, so it's interesting. You said sisters. I had Hannah and princes.
And I don't know why she thought that.
Was it princes? So I thought, I'll have to check, and I'll put it up. He's probably right, but I had princes said that. But anyways, it's...
Yeah. I mean, he was there in good faith. He sent some men in good faith just to say, congratulations, and condolences about your father. I hope we can have the same relationship that your father and I had, and his sister, which is what I wrote down. We'll double check that for you. Says, they're here to spy on you, and he believes them.
Well, so as we discussed, I think we had the same conversation, and we can go back, but when the new king starts, they have to, there's always that vulnerability. Are they going to have the right power? Nahash is, but Nahash, right? The king, the new king, was probably aware of that. So anyway,
I think with with that kind of transition, you've got inexperience with a young new king.
Yeah.
And then he has to worry if his father's friends are going to be his friends, and things like that.
And then David had a big reputation. He never lost a battle. So another than that would be, why would you need spies? But maybe, who knows?
Continuing on, when David heard of this, about his men being shaved, and he sent his army to defeat the king of Nahash. Hunayn hired 32,000 chariots and the king of Makkah with his army. Yep. So he's going to go to battle with David.
So now they were worried about battle, and they were just guaranteed it now.
Ammonites and Syrians defeated. An accounting of Joab planning and arranging his men for battle against the Syrians, and how he put his faith in the hands of the Lord. In verse 13, be strong and let us use our strength for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him.
So it wasn't as deep as we've heard before, where they always prayed and sought guidance before going to battle, but they do mention it. Yeah. This is important.
They go on to describe in detail the battle, how many of the enemy were killed, etc. In the end, the enemy made peace with Israel. Of course, they were defeated, so they had no choice.
Yeah, and even the people they hired. So, and then
drink break. Chapter 20, the capture of, how do you say that? Rabbah?
Yeah, could be.
Joab, which is the head of David's army, ravaged the country of the Ammonites and overthrew Rabbah. He brought the people out and put them to labor. David did this to all the cities.
Yep. Every time they conquered him, he didn't kill them all off, but they all became subservience to him, and they did work. They did work for him.
This is where I wish the Bible had some illustrations. Philistine giants killed. I would love to see what they're talking about, like a giant standing next to a normal man, like how much bigger.
Well, yeah, and we learned. Well, there is a little bit of that in the second or third giant. But it wasn't like Goliath. They really described Goliath's height, how big he was. Right. Now we don't get it because they use cubits or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, they were giants. And I remember reading in Bibles for Dummies and some other references when I was covering Samuel because David and Goliath is always, it's one of the most famous parts of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And there was some, I didn't get it, I don't know if you did, but there was some thought that Chronicles, since it didn't mention David's battle with Goliath, although we hear the Goliath, we did hear that David's brother struck down a giant. Mm-hmm. And I'd heard some scuttlebutt or whatnot, or what they say whatsoever, that it wasn't maybe David that did it, which I don't find that to be the case in my reading. So just food for thought.
So chapter 20 goes on. Philistines giants killed. And there was a war again with Gath, where there was a man of great stature, who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number. And he also was descended from the giants. And when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down.
Absolutely.
I don't remember if it said how he struck him down.
Struck him down. Yeah, I mean there's less detail. So back to the redundancy, you're not getting the same exact stories. I actually think it's less. I think, like you said, there's parts that are really bragging on David on what he's bringing into the temple, but the rest of it is pretty kind of low key. It wasn't any great battles discussed. So it's just like, oh yeah, we did this. It's kind of like cut to the chase.
Matter of factly. Mm-hmm. Yep. Chapter 21. David's census brings pestilence. So I think we recall this one. This one, really rings a bell, where he played into the hands of Satan.
This comes right out and said it. Satan stood against Israel.
Yes. Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel. I mean, out of all the things, just number people?
Well, so it kind of goes back. And I'm foggy on it, and that's why we do this, and we can watch the videos. So feel free to go back, because I will. But there was always a concern. David it didn't matter how many, as long as he prayed for God's guidance, it didn't matter how many people had. There would be enough. And then it goes back to the numbers.
Thank you. That's helpful for me.
Yeah, so
that makes a lot of sense.
But this time,
God was on his side, so I mean, he could have had a handful of people.
Well, yeah, but just the fact we want your numbers, and it was interesting. I read several versions, and the ESV version, which we're reading, is the only one that said Satan, and it's they all referenced, it's all Satan's tactics to do it,
And do you recall, did he think it was God? Was he deceived? Did he think it was God that was asking him the number?
Well, I think Satan planted the seed of doubt, saying we need to know how many people we have for battle, and I think that's what it is.
Okay.
But again, it was only Satan mentioned in here.
Yeah.
And the other ones, I mean, it's still Satan. We know it was Satan
So
because
he should have known he didn't need the number.
Well,
Israel. And
as
Joab
we're
tried to
going to
remind
find
him of
out,
that.
if he didn't,
Yeah.
and because he clearly didn't, but we're going to find out, and that's where I have some commentary here too.
So David asked the head of his army, Joab, to number Israel, and Joab put up a little bit of a stink. In verse 3, he says, "May the Lord add to his people 100 times as many as they are. Are they not, my lord the king, all of them my lord's servants? Why then should my lord require this? Why should it be a cause of guilt for Israel?" But the king's word prevailed against Joab. So Joab was arguing against.
Yeah, he was
numbering.
the good, he was the good angel on the the Animal House shoulder. God provides. Don't worry about it.
So Joab did his job, numbered the people, and reported back. But God was displeased with this thing, and he spoke to David through Gad the seer. In verse 3, the Lord offered 3 forms of punishment for Israel and made David choose one. And that would be. In verse 13, David said to Gad, "I am in great distress. Let me fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercy is very great, but do not let me fall into the hand of man." In verse 14 continues, "So the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel, and 70,000 men of Israel fell."
Yeah, so it's interesting. His 3 choices were 3 years of famine, and we learned about these and I can't remember if it was Samuel, because that's what I have
That
my
seems
notes
like
on.
it would have killed way more than 70,000 too. 3 years.
Yeah, and then 3 months of devastation, and then 3 days of. This one was 3 days of the sword of the Lord. So we from Samuel, and there was it is detailed on they actually saw the angel of the Lord come down and he was about to strike Jerusalem, and I mean it's getting ahead of just a bit, but back in Samuel, 2 Samuel. Chapter 24, verses 10 through 14, we learn the same story. So you can go back and read. It's kind of interesting, the 2 sides to it. It was a famine, though, or 3 years of a plague. So it was interesting how the first author, the author of Samuel, which was Samuel, the seer, versus this, which I heard this is Ezra. Ezra that wrote Chronicles.
Okay.
I know there's a good band called Better Than Ezra, so maybe because Ezra didn't write the details that Samuel did, but that was an interesting play on it because there was some good details that I'll add more to it if needed.
Yes. So Steve had just mentioned the angel that was sent to Jerusalem to destroy it. God relented and did not go through with it, told the angel to stop. David said it was only he who deserved to be punished and asked God to not unleash a plague on the people. Absolutely. Which that makes a lot of sense to me. It was David. They lost 70,000 people, but nothing happened to David.
Well, it wouldn't because he's his chosen. I mean, the lineage.
Well, I guess I'm sorry, 70,000 of his. I'm sure he took that pretty personally.
Oh, definitely. I mean,
he's responsible
because
for
he's the one.
70,000
He's
deaths.
the one that questioned. He's the one that did. Did the census, ordered it anyways.
That's worth than probably dying yourself. So, David builds an altar. Now the angel of the Lord had commanded Gad to say to David that David should go up and raise an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Ornan offered it to David for free when David went to ask him about it, but David insisted on paying Ornan full price, 600 shekels of gold by weight for the site, and David built the altar.
And that's a lot of money. I mean, that really is a lot of money. And he sold them not just the land, but he sold them his cattle to sacrifice and the wheat for the wheat offerings. And then this is interesting too, because as David was approaching, Ornan and his family, his sons, were threshing. Obviously, as they do threshing on the floor, they see the angel, and this David's people. They hid and scared, were frightened.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting. That's kind of juxtaposed to what we read last time, where it's just a plague. Where this is pretty fascinating, and I found it fascinating that they can actually see the angel of, we'll call it death, wreaking havoc. But he has his sword, hold it out. He has held it out. I mean, that's one thing you'll notice. Is until this all happens, comes to fruition, until he builds or buys this and builds the altar, that's when he sheaths the sword and it's done. So that's that man.
Yeah.
Could you imagine that seeing
No.
this? I mean have you ever? It's kind of I imagine it like being out in an empty field or even a golf course when thunder and lightning come and you have nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
So
So true.
I digress.
On to chapter 22, which starts with no title.
Exactly.
In verse 1, David says, "Here shall be the house of the Lord God, and here the altar of burnt offerings for Israel." And then title, David prepares for temple building. See?
Yeah.
David's getting it
Here
ready.
we go. Here we go.
I don't think I ever read where God tells David to start getting the materials ready. David just took it upon himself.
God does not tell.
He really wants to be a part of this. Which I'm sure saved Solomon, obviously years of preparation to get all this stuff ready. I mean, it was great that it was ready to go.
He was the greatest king up until this point, right? God's favorite. So he's won many battles. Many spoils come with it. He made friends with people with like the cedar from the Tyrians or whatever they are. But we've never heard this boasting of him doing this.
Yeah.
And again, I want to talk about it now, but I want to wait till we get there.
I know, and I guess just in my head, I was thinking, if it was me, if I'm told don't build a temple, I'd be like, okay, great. I'll leave it up to somebody. I wouldn't think, but I'll get the materials ready. But I think it's so smart, really.
Yeah. Well, yes, it wasn't just. Yeah, he had stuff on hand, but he's really making plans to do this, and we never learned this before. We did not. What I understood was all Solomon. So.
All right. So I started with chapter 22, right?
Yep.
All right. David prepared for temple building.
Yep.
David commanded to gather together the residents of aliens who were in the land of Israel, the craftsmen, the laborers. He readied the supplies needed to build the temple: stone, iron, copper, wood, cedar, etc.
Everything. Yep. Everything. And we'll get into more counts and qualities eventually. Whether we'll
Can you imagine what all that material would have looked like? You know what I mean? Like just piled up out in the open. It had to just be acres and acres of stuff
in
ready
the
to go.
vision he had, we never learned before. It was new to me, but he had this whole grandiose vision of how the temple was going to look. So
think about how long it would take for a stone cutter to like even just get a block ready, and to just prepare and be all set to go.
And the irony of Michelangelo Buonarroti carved David out of stone. So,
yeah, right. Solomon charged to build the temple. Then he called for Solomon his son and charged him to build a house for the Lord, the God of Israel. David explains to Solomon that God will provide peace from their enemies so the temple may be built. David tells him of all the people and materials he has gathered, and he commanded all the leaders of Israel to help Solomon.
So what chapter or what verses are you on?
What verses?
Oh wait, no,
We're in chapter 22.
So I was going to say I'm going to add my little commentary from Kings, 1 Kings, chapter 5, verses 1 through 7. Hiram, king of Tyre, friend of David. Solomon, remember we discussed him making a trade-off. He's like, I'm not gonna steal your stuff. I'm not gonna, we're friends. I'm gonna pay for you, and you guys are craftsmen, and so this is where a lot of this cedar comes from. So it's pretty
together.
Neat.
Yep. Let's see. Chapter 23.
Ooh,
David organizes the Levites. When David was old and full of days, he made Solomon his son king over Israel. David numbered the Levites, 30 years old and up. And he placed them in different positions. 38,000 in the house of the Lord, 6,000 officers and judges, 4,000 on instruments, music. And David organized them in divisions by the sons of Levi, sons of Gershon, and etc.
Yep. That's when you started getting into
all the names.
Yep.
Verse 25, David says, "The Lord, the God of Israel, has given rest to his people, and he dwells in Jerusalem forever." Continues in verse 26, "And so the Levites no longer need to carry the tabernacle or any of the things for its service." The sons of Levi were numbered from 20 years old and upward, for their duty was to assist the sons of Aaron for the service of the house of the Lord, having the care of the courts and the chambers, the cleansing of all that is holy, and any work for the service of the house of God, and any other duties listed.
Just to refresh my memory. So Levites, that's where Aaron's from, right? Wasn't he he was a descendant of Levi, because all the Levites were the priests.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was lazy to go, to go back and look.
Right.
I'm pretty certain I know it. But
yes. Chapter 24, David organizes the priests. This chapter records the organization and departments of priests. verses 1 through 19, and a list of non-priestly Levites, verses 20 through 31. So that's pretty much what that chapter covers.
Yeah, and I didn't put a lot down in these because it
Yeah.
was just the lineage and the names.
Exactly.
Not the lineage, but the
That's
names.
what will be there when you read it.
Yeah. And to read it, I don't find it, I mean, it's interesting. I keep using the word interesting, so maybe that's the drinking word for Steve. Touche. But yeah, I just enjoyed reading it, and it was tried to remember them, but writing it down, it's like, oh, it's going to take a lot of room.
Yeah.
So
I would enjoy reading it more if it was names I could pronounce. You know, if it was like Mike, Steve, Tony. You know?
Yo, Tony, how you doing? Tony Bag of Donuts, huh?
Chapter 26, division. I'm sorry.
Divisions of
David organizes the musicians. I think that's where we're at, right?
20. Yep, that's 25, right?
25. Yeah. David and the chiefs of the service also set apart for the service the sons of Asaph, and of Heman, and of Jeduthun,
Sounds good.
and prophesies with lyres, with harps, with cymbals. He goes on to list the number of sons and their names.
And lyres is not people telling untruths. It's a musical instrument, so.
Does it have strings? Is it like a little,
Oh my goodness!
lyre?
I
or does it have a bow? I don't know.
I think yeah.
I was watching Game of Thrones, and I thought the kid was playing a lyre. It was like a
Yeah,
little,
I'm thinking. Well, it's a stringed instrument, but I'm just not certain if it's that little. If it's like a harp,
It's got like 12 strings on it. It's real tiny.
and it could
or-
be. I don't know.
We'll look it up. All right, chapter 26, division of the gatekeepers. That's the job I want. Their
You
main-
can come. You shall
I'd
not.
be, I'd be sleeping.
pass.
I'd be sleeping on duty. Their main duty, and you couldn't like listen to music or anything back then either. You just sat there. No little TVs,
mean, you probably
no
could.
phone.
But if you're listening to music, it's not something you chose, and it's somebody else singing from somewhere.
What
So-
did people do back then, man? When they just sat there, if you go to any place now and you see like guards like sitting or something, they're on their phone. All right, the main duty was to guard the gates of the tabernacle or the temple.
Which isn't built yet, so.
Also, gates on the roads leading into Jerusalem. This wasn't because God needed protection, but to prevent people from intentionally or unintentionally doing disrespectful or blasphemous things in God's house.
Yeah.
As for the divisions of the gatekeepers, of the Korahites, the Meshelemiah, the son of Kor, of the sons of Asaph, cast by lots names of sons, what gates they served at, northeast, southwest. I just read that and I have no idea what it means, but
Well,
there we go.
I mean, so obviously the temple's not built yet, but he's not foreshadowing. That's a bad word. But
getting things prepared.
getting prepared, getting the house
Yeah.
in order for, hey, this is how you can do it. I'm not certain why, as we all know, Solomon is the wisest of all kings. So I'll hold that thought.
Treasurers and other officials, and of the Levites, Ahijah had charge of the treasuries of the house of God and the treasuries of the dedicated gifts. The sons of Laden, the sons of Gershonites, belonging to Laden, the heads of the fathers' houses belonging to Laden the Gershonite, Jahili, names the sons and their positions. Other appointments are the judges, people that manage the affairs of the king, etc. So there's just a lot of different appointments that he made in his administration. I guess
Yes,
you'd
sir.
want to say, right? And none of them had to be confirmed by the Senate. David just said, "This is your job. That's it.
Six.
Boom,
Well, that's when you have
done."
a king. When you have a king.
That's right.
So
Military divisions. This is the number of people of Israel, the heads of the fathers' houses, the commanders of thousands and hundreds, and their officers who served the king in all matters concerning the divisions that came and went, month after month throughout the year, each division numbering 24,000.
and interestingly, as I mentioned, I didn't want to take notes and write down a lot of names because of this.
Yeah.
I wrote down the 12 leaders of the 24,000.
It was an interesting read, too. I thought about it
Yeah.
like, oh, man, I hate to not mention this, but it's just so much.
Yeah, I'm not going to read them, but
Yeah.
but it's for some reason it struck me to write them down.
Yeah. And the number 24,000, what's the significance?
I don't know that, but there was one for every month,
Yes.
one leader, and then there were some that helped out. They mentioned some sons that helped out in the leaders, so I just thought it was interesting.
Very interesting, yeah.
Yep.
We move on.
Leaders. Well, there's a leader of tribes. Is that where you're
Leader of
going?
tribes.
And I
And I
wrote
wrote
these
down,
Yeah.
and I wrote down, need I say more? That's it.
Well, there, Steve, I wrote down, and these are kind of more to
They
help
named
me.
the leaders of the tribes.
Well, yeah, so the Reubenites, Simeonites, Levi, Aaron. So these are, which is why I was confused about. Aaron was part of the Levites. He was a Levite. So, anyways,
For some reason, he's listed on his own. I don't know.
well, because these are the leaders of the tribes. They're not really
Yes.
these are not the 12 tribes of Israel. So I don't think so. If they are, correct me and do the old virtual to Steve.
Please let us know.
Yes, because again, this is a conversation between Randy and I.
Yeah.
And we're kind of invoking you, the audience.
That's right.
All of you, Mr. Steve, and a couple other people.
I'm not an expert. I just play one on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we don't even play one on YouTube. We just YouTube. We just read it.
Amateur.
Yes.
Bible amateur.
Well, it helps me out. Just like I said, this helps a lot.
Absolutely.
Helps you keep you motivated.
Absolutely. Chapter 28. David's charge to Israel. David gathers all of the officials of Israel, and he tells them that it's God's will that Solomon be his successor, and he will build the Lord's house. And David charged to Solomon. He reminds Solomon to be faithful to the Lord. In verse 9, if you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will cast you off forever.
So that's interesting. We both have that. I wrote that exact down, just like you.
Very important. He gave Solomon the plans for the temple, and Solomon's probably like, man, I had my own plans.
Well, Solomon's, okay, so we'll get to it.
See, that would be my dad. That's what my dad would do. He'd be like, here's the plans. You better build it exactly like that.
Well, I mean, we do that with our kids, right? I mean, I remember my son, I'm like, he didn't listen to shit. Sorry, I said a bad word. He didn't listen to me.
Yeah, right. So it's interesting because the plans for the temple also mentioned a lot of the items that would be built for the temple.
I mean, and what they'd be made out of, and exact.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of detail. So.
Yep. One of the things they mentioned was a mercy seat.
Yep.
Did you look up what that was?
Well, that's we talked about the mercy seat is above that's where God sits, right?
The mercy seat is the gold lid placed on the ark.
Mm-hmm.
With the cherubs.
Correct. It's no.
Is that where God sits, or is he inside the ark?
Well, he's not inside the ark.
He's not inside the ark?
No, we know that. Well, at one point there was the Ten Commandments, and then there was the Moses staff with a snake on it, and then there was some manna and see, this is why we do these. We can remember and recall because it's
exactly. And can you imagine if we had 5 or 10 guys that were all sitting around? I mean, how much more we would actually. Well, probably take a lot longer to get through it, but I mean, can you imagine how much more?
And I think we go there. Input. I mean, so this series again, I'm digressing slightly, but our segueing, I guess was the word, is this was for you and I, our challenge to kind of do this complete. And then I have lots of ideas what we want to do. This isn't the end. I mean, once we get through the Bible, that's just goal number 1. The rest of it then is really conversing on that. And I think that's when we bring in friends. I mean, I do think so. So at least.
Yes, and I predict we'll be done reading the Bible in our late 70s, early 80s. So
I don't agree. I think we're going to accomplish some stuff.
Because we're at about a year right now.
Yeah, we had some snafus that came up. No,
summertime,
I mean, and this is going to date the video slightly, but it is what is today? It's January 17th. I did a Bible Reviewers Facebook post about a friend of mine. Seth Kirky, he was my praise leader, about to be a new pastor eventually, because he finished his schooling for it. He posted a really good thing. If Satan can't make you evil, he's going to make you busy. So I'm gonna be honest with it. That kind of hit me today. I'm not going to go into details, but it's interesting because I don't think I have it in me to be well, I know everybody has it in them to be evil. I just don't want to ever act on it because I just choose not to for many reasons. Primarily one, I'm terrified of prison and punishment, and not just from earthly things, but God. But But it was very profound, that statement. So thanks, Seth, for posting that. That was nice.
Hit me as soon as you said it.
Yeah, so.
Interesting. Okay.
Now we digress.
Yes. Where the heck were we? Mercy seat. Okay.
Yes.
They go on to discuss the priests and their roles, which I think we've already said 50 times. Steve mentioned the weight of the gold and silver for all the various items used in the temple. I mean, the actual weights of what would go into certain items.
Absolutely.
And in verse 19, all this he made clear to me in writing from the hand of the Lord, all the work to be done according to the plan.
So I'm going to take back an earlier statement I said. We just discussed this.
Yes.
So David is claiming this is divine intervention. So I can't believe I said what I said.
So, I just said David handed him the plans, but David didn't plan this.
It was God. Well, I knew that was God, and I wasn't worried about David.
Yes. Why did I forget that, though?
But we just remember, we just discussed.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything, but here it says all the details are from the Lord. This was made clear to David by the Lord.
I should have known that. I don't know why that left my head. I'm thinking
And
David sat down like a draftsman and
A draftsman or a draftsman?
or architect or whatever.
Okay.
Verse 20, then David said to Solomon, be strong and courageous and do it. I love how that ends.
Do it.
And do it. Do not be afraid. And
That
do
was
not be
before
dismayed.
Nike was around here. Just do it. It was do it.
Do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed. For the Lord God, even my God, is with you. I thought that was a weird thing to say. Even my God is with you. It's the same God. What are you talking about, dude?
No.
You're talking about David? He's not your God. He's all of our God.
Yes. But
Selfish.
He is David's God. He's my
All right.
God. He's your God. He's our
David's
God.
special. And we are on the last chapter, 29, offerings for the temple. And in verse 1, David the king said to all the assembly, Solomon my son, whom alone God has chosen, is young and inexperienced, and the work is great. For the palace will not be for man, but for the Lord God. And he told them of all the gold and silver items that he's prepared for the building. In verse 3, moreover, in addition to all that I provided for the holy house, I have treasures of my own of gold and silver. And because of my devotion to the house of my God, I give it to the house of my God. And he listed the amounts that he was providing, gold, silver, etc.
Yeah, not only
Precious stones.
not yeah. So it was interesting. Again, there's my word again.
Because it's all the Lord's treasure anyways. He was, just held it in his house instead of
well.
the tent?
So instead of there was always the offerings that were made and put into the temple to make things work, right? But this is David's stuff. He talked about what he contributed to himself solely, and then you're going to go into the leaders and what they did. They
I wonder
did
how
this-
David got to this, or would decide how much he would get to keep.
I mean, he's the king; he gets to keep it all. But so he has.
It just seems to me, though, that we've read before that all that should go to the Lord. All that should
Well,
be
they had
dedicated to the Lord.
different offerings would go directly to the Lord,
Yeah.
right? And to the Lord would be like I don't know. I mean, something to do with how the church is run, and in the purest form, not in like the hey, I'm going to get more, So,
Gotcha.
but it's about actually doing the Lord's work and doing the stuff that they needed to do, like the building altars, sacrificing, because you have to. I don't know if they had to buy all the sacrificial animals for like at the church area.
True.
I know people brought them in.
A lot of expenses then. Okay.
Yeah.
Then they go
Making
on
that-
to mention others that donated, leaders of fathers' houses, leaders of tribes, commanders, etc., and they list the amounts.
Yeah.
Then the people rejoiced because they had given willingly, for with a whole heart they had offered freely to the Lord.
Yes.
Everybody gave. So everybody's kind of like contributing to building this
Well,
temple.
it kind of
which is
goes to our personal
beautiful,
thing,
yeah.
and I mean, we're not even in New Testament, but this is all kind of tithing, right? So,
Yeah.
that's
David prays in the assembly. Therefore, David blessed the Lord in the presence of all the assembly. And he says in the blessing in verse 19, grant to Solomon my son a whole heart, that he may keep your commandments, your testimonies, and your statutes, performing all, and that he may build the palace for which I have made provisions. See, he mentions it again.
so. Well, I'm going to jump in, or do you want to finish?
After the blessing, they made multiple offerings, and they ate and drank before the Lord on the day with great gladness.
Okay, so back to his point, we're on the same page here. In Kings, First Kings, when we hear about it, that was totally different. So when Solomon, we learned, God said, "I'll give you whatever you ask for." What did Solomon ask for? Wisdom, justice. So this is taking away, in my opinion, it's a different side, different part of it, but this is. I don't think David means to put down, and the author doesn't mean to put down Solomon. It's just a different perspective on what they, I guess, felt happened. Solomon was young; he wasn't experienced.
Yeah.
When we get done with this, I'm going to follow up with some of my takeaways. So,
It's
go
so
ahead.
smart to realize that.
Yeah. So, but this
You know?
could be that David had really trained him well. So it doesn't.
Yes.
It not necessarily means it's bad.
Right. Very true. I thought I knew everything when I was a kid.
We all do. That's why you want to move out. You always
I've been like, how about a Lamborghini? And
that'd be a good go-to-school car. Yeah.
Solomon anointed king.
Again.
And they made Solomon, the son of David, king the second time, it says. And they anointed him as prince for the Lord, and Zodiac as priest. So Zodiac was, he was anointed as a priest, and then he went ahead and anointed David as king for the second time. Now,
in front of him.
Where did we first hear about Solomon being anointed the first time? Was in First Kings.
Yes.
See, I had to go back and read that because I was like, second time, and I'm like, oh yeah. So David's son, which he had many sons, Adonijah, with the commander of the army, Joab, David's commander, helped, and with the priest's help, Abiathar throws a party with a lot of dignitaries and a lot of important people, right? And that kid declares himself, or they declare him king, Adonijah. David finds out, didn't they hear like a lot of cheering and whatnot off in the distance?
So you're doing the recount? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just recounting that. So this is why it was second time.
So see that? That's
yes.
I actually have that. That's good.
So David finds out, and he immediately has Solomon anointed king.
Yeah. Correct. That was the first time he brought.
That was the first time.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was so that, when the people at the party found out, oh, wait a minute, oh man, we just betrayed. And a lot of them just scattered and had to leave.
Yeah, because, and it was interesting because Adonijah or whatever,
yes,
he was making the play, right? So he started.
Not the first, not the last.
Yep, correct. So.
It goes on. Then Solomon sat on the throne of the Lord as king in place of David his father. The Lord bestowed on him such royal majesty as had not been on any king before him and Israel. Lastly, the death of David. David reigned 40 years and died. The end.
That was the end, and it was good in the recap. So things we didn't hear about was Absalom. Remember Absalom from the last one?
Yes.
He was one of David's bad sons. He actually kicked him out of power and chased him around and tried to kill him. That was bad.
That's right.
I already kind of made the point of Solomon. Solomon asking God for wisdom in Chronicles. Appears David tells him to ask. Again, could be good father advice. And then we both had the same point about how the second time. I mean, so when Adonijah, however you say his name, was making a play for king, and he brought everybody together, including Abiathar, or however you say the priest's name, and a bunch of leaders, Joab, a bunch of people that were faithful to David and him. He brought them in and was making a play and crowning himself a king. And of course, it was, oh my goodness gracious, Solomon's mother. The one he had to fear, Bathsheba. Yeah, Bathsheba's come in and told him, hey, they're making the king. And he got up, and that's when he made Solomon the king. And that's when everybody shouted. And so, yeah.
If you've been reading along with us, you'd already know all this.
Yeah, and you should know this. It
is
good. This is great.
Yeah, because it's in the past. You kind of forget it. We're moving forward, so it's just a great reminder.
Awesome.
All right. Is there anything else you want to add? Let's wrap it up.
I'm looking forward to Second Chronicles.
Yes.
We did 2 videos, one half and one half.
We're blasting through this. We're going to try to make a commitment to get together a little bit more often.
Well, it's winter. It's winter in...
Yeah. There's still things going on, so personal things. And
life.
Whatnot,
as what happens, if he can't make us evil, he's going to make us busy.
Yep.
So I have been making sure that I am reading, even though I can't get ahead too far because then I lose some details.
And if you subscribe, you'll know when the videos are coming out. So
hoorah.
Be sure to
it's
do
for
that.
your own good. It's not for our good.
Exactly.
It's for your good.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us. Bible over a beer.
Y'all come back now.
See you soon.